like to thank the Festival of Scholars for giving us this opportunity to bring this, this beautiful art to you, and for our opportunity to interpret it in our presentation. And I would really like to thank Mariana Robles-Dalany for the idea of doing this. She's been working on this since last August, as far as I know, and it's been really, really fun. So thank you very much. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about choreography. And for me, because I've been a dancer my whole life in some form or fashion, and I write about dance and talk about dance and research about dance and so on, doing choreography is really about sensing, messaging, and writing and creating for whatever it is I'm working on. It's beautiful, and in contemporary culture, we have dance that's very sensational. So we like to see the young women and young men do really, really fast acrobatics, and they hold their legs really, really high in the air. And for me, I'm thinking that my leg is really, really high in the air when it's about like here. I'm thinking, it's gotta be up by my ear, but in fact it isn't, it's quite low. But what I wanna do is I want to bring the beauty to the dance and the way I'm interpreting it with the music here with Langston Hughes. So luckily, there will be a couple of young women who will perform for you as well, but the work that I'm doing is going to be very adagio type. So my legs will be modestly raised, and I think they're gonna be up really, really high, but they won't be. Also, a younger me who had both of my real hips might have performed this work for you in point. And in fact, when I was choreographing this, I was envisioning using point shoes to perform for you today. But then I came and I looked at the stage and I thought, you're old because you're a little wiser than you used to be, and it's probably not a good idea for you to use point shoes on this stage because it's very slippery and stuff. And my ego's not so invested that I have to do that. So all of the work today is going to be on demi-point. So if you would like to, though, and you're really into it, I can put it on to you. I can give it to you. We can work together, and we can stage it someplace else if you've got point shoes you'd like to use. So I don't really have a whole lot else to say about the choreography without giving it away. I've enjoyed the opportunity to work with this music and work with Langston Hughes in my imagination and reading about him and his life, and you know, just sort of imagining what he went through and the kind of life he had, because I actually did live in Joplin, Missouri for a while, and there's a street called Langston Hughes Boulevard that runs through the area of Joplin, Missouri, that's supposedly for the African American community, and there isn't a real there wasn't a lot of advancement in that area for African American people. So this has been really fun for me, and it's also been really inspiring, because did you read about him? I mean, good grief, he's so prolific. I couldn't imagine. I'm trying to, you know, crank out an article every year. Here he is, like writing poetry and books and everything like that, multiple times per year over his life. So anyway, thank you so much for attending, and I will move on to the next stage of my process here.
Hi everyone, thanks for coming, and thanks again to Mariana for organizing this. I was also happy to have reason to spend a lot of time with Langston Hughes this last week. I've read him before, it was good to return to him. I think poetry is meant to be read aloud, so I'm going to start by reading the very short poem, Winter Moon, aloud to you 3 times, and then I'd like you to join me in reading it for the 4th and the 5th time, and I invite you to find your own rhythm within those lines. Okay, so me 3 times, and then you a 4th and 5th time. It's Winter Moon, it's in your program, and before I knew it was in the program, I also made tiny blue handouts, so you have that as well. This is Langston Hughes' Winter Moon. How thin and sharp is the moon tonight. How thin and sharp and ghostly white is the slim curved crook of the moon tonight. How thin and sharp is the moon tonight. How thin and sharp and ghostly white is the slim curved crook of the moon tonight. How thin and sharp is the moon tonight. How thin and sharp and ghostly white is the slim curved crook of the moon tonight. Okay. How thin and sharp is the moon tonight. How thin and sharp and ghostly white is the slim curved crook of the moon tonight. One more time with feeling. How thin and sharp is the moon tonight. How thin and sharp and ghostly white is the slim curved crook of the moon tonight. I promise if you do this another 10 times, you'll be walking along. How slim and, yeah, okay. Then since poets do inhabit bodies and have cultural identities, absorb the sounds and rhythms of their surroundings, and navigate the cultural and political waters of their particular time and place, which for Hughes was almost an entire lifetime in pre-civil rights United States, it might help to hear a few details of Hughes's prolific and influential life. He was born in 1902 in Joplin, Missouri, descendant of African-American and white slave-owning great-grandparents. He lived in several Midwestern states, including Kansas, Illinois, and Ohio. He traveled in West Africa and Europe, including a visit to Paris in the 1920s, a setting rich for the mingling of poets and musicians. He was a poet, playwright, novelist, activist, and advocate for racial pride. He spoke candidly about inequality, as in his poem Children's Rhymes, that includes the lines, "What don't bug them white kids sure bugs me. We know everybody ain't free." Hughes studied at Columbia, lived in Harlem, became a central figure in the Harlem Renaissance movement, and continued to live in Harlem until his death in 1967. Hughes's jazz and blues rhythm-inspired poems often witness everyday working-class life. Here's another short poem in its entirety. The title is longer than the poem. The title is Little Lyric of Great Importance. I wish the rent was heaven sent. Hughes celebrates African-American identity and lineage in his poems. And one of his early poems, and you might say the poem that sort of made his name, made him famous, is called The Negro Speaks of Rivers. So I wanted to read this to you, and again, noticing the long line into the past that he's drawing to connect to himself as both individual and in some ways representative. I've known rivers ancient as the world and older than the flow of human blood in human veins. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. I bathed in the Euphrates when dawns were young. I built my hut near the Congo and it lulled me to sleep. I looked upon the Nile and raised the pyramids above it. I heard the singing of the Mississippi when Abe Lincoln went down to New Orleans, and I've seen its muddy bosom turn all golden in the sunset. I've known rivers, ancient dusky rivers. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. Hughes also in his poems protests inequality and depicts not only the physical and political suffering, but also the psychic suffering, as in his poem Harlem, later titled Dream Deferred. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it explode? Since poetry and music maybe come from similar places, I think about Hughes as having music in his poetry and poetry in his music, and all sorts of variations of those two things combined. In his poem, Song for Billie Holiday, Song and sadness are intentionally blurred and merged and confused. So I'll give you just the very beginning of that poem so you can kind of see the shifting relationship between sad songs and sadness and song as separate entities. So he writes, "What can purge my heart of the song and the sadness? What can purge my heart but the song of the sadness? What can purge my heart of the sadness of the song?" And in his poem, The Weary Blues, another of Langston Hughes' famous poems, the speaker in the poem hears and joins the blues singer he observes. So another instance of that merging. The speaker observes this blues singer and the blues, which he talks about as, quote, coming from a black man's soul. The voice of the blues he hears is, quote, deep, and the piano is, quote, old. And the tune, which he describes as being crooned, quote, goes far into the night. And this tune continues to echo even after the stars go out, and so does the moon. So here again, that connection to something timeless and sort of always and already present. Hughes, a lot of Langston Hughes's poem titles directly reference different kinds of songs or aspects of songs. For instance, he has poems entitled Sun Song, Spirituals, Harlem Night Song, Gypsy Melodies, and then this short poem called Night, 4 songs. Night of the 2 moons and the 17 stars, night of the day before yesterday and the day after tomorrow, night of the 4 songs unsung, sorrow, 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 sorrow. Langston Hughes embraced the blues. Some people think blues are sad, but I think the other way to see them, and the way lots of people do, is that there's something pleasurable about spending time with your sadness, or exploring your sadness, or expressing your sadness. And I see that a lot in Langston Hughes' poems. He seems to take a certain pleasure in giving name to sources of sadness. So he embraced the blues, its rhythms and lyrics and culture, poems that speak to the power of both the written and the sung word, poems fueled by rhythms that move and keep moving, that take flight. He wrote poems with sounds that tap and thump alongside our own heartbeats and breath. In the spirit of Hughes's own poem, or collection of poems, Montage of a Dream Deferred, I looked through the poem titles themselves and made my own sort of montage, rearranging them, so not in chronological order, but grouping and rearranging just a dozen or so titles, in part because I thought it would be nice for people not familiar with his work to hear a list of his titles, and you get a sense of where his fascinations lie. So here's my sort of a poem made of his titles. Evening Song, Midwinter Blues, Young Gal's Blues, Miss Blues Child. Bound North Blues, Street Song, Jam Session, Bebop Boys. Ladies Boogie, Dream Boogie, Easy Boogie, Croon. Jukebox Love Song, Boogie 1 a.m., Nightmare Boogie, Blues at Dawn. And that last list especially sounds to me like a long night out that didn't end that well. It began with a jukebox and ended with Blues at Dawn. Okay, so the last thing I want to share with you, one of the poems being performed today, is Genius Child, which I think is another good example of Hughes acknowledging music's power, both to celebrate but also to lament. And in this case, in the poem Genius Child, music's power to lament a dominant culture's inability or refusal to accommodate, whatever is original or extraordinary, or whatever strikes its own note above the rest. Genius Child. This is a song for the genius child. Sing it softly, for the song is wild. Sing it softly as ever you can, lest the song get out of hand. Nobody loves a genius child. Can you love an eagle, tame or wild? Wild or tame, can you love a monster, a frightening name? Nobody loves a genius child. Kill him and let his soul run wild. Thanks.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Mariana, for organizing this. My name is Michael Hart. I'm a professor in the music department. You should have picked up a little sheet of musical excerpts. If you can't read music, that's okay. I'll try my best to explain it. If you can read music, all the better. We've learned a lot about choreography and Langston Hughes, but you may not know a lot about Ricky Ian Gordon. He's a composer based in New York City. He's from Long Island and studied at Carnegie Mellon, and most of his works are for voice, either voice and piano, musical theater. He's also written several operas. And like a lot of composers in the latter part of the 20th century and at the beginning of the 21st century, a characteristic of a lot of their music is what we call polystylism, which is this free mixing of all sorts of different genres of music, whether it be pop music, rock music, avant-garde, jazz, German art song. And it's not to say that composers before this time haven't mixed works. Bach freely mixed music from different geographical locations. Tchaikovsky mixed sort of Russian folklore type music with Western classical music. But to the extent that composers today mix is unprecedented, because if you think, you can just go into iTunes right now and listen to everything from jazz to pop and to classical within seconds of each other. And so composers are responding to this. And you're going to hear this today in Genius Child, the whole song cycle. You'll hear elements specifically that sound like they're straight out of a Broadway musical. You'll hear elements of jazz, since we are studying Langston Hughes, or since they're based on Langston Hughes. You'll also hear elements of some avant-garde, dissonant aspects to it. This is a song cycle. If you're not familiar with what a song cycle is where a composer will take the poetry or the words of a particular writer or poet and then build sort of a multi-movement piece based around some sort of theme. That it's not unusual for them to take sort of random, in this case, random poetry and sort of combine them together to make one sort of cohesive whole. And it's not just that the lyrics help sort of unify this whole piece, but it's also there are certain musical elements. And my hope is that I'm going to tell you what you're going to hear, and that'll help guide your ears. You're listening to these things, sort of certain ideas that will come back and back and back. The structure of the song cycle, there are 10 movements. The first one sort of serves as sort of this prologue or this prelude. And then movements 2 through 6 will refer to specific activities that it's sort of like someone watching someone do something. And then movements 7 through 10 are more philosophical in nature, a little bit more introspective. I'm not going to speak on all these movements because there's so much material. We would be here till 4 o'clock, and I don't want to put you through that kind of pain. But I'm just going to touch on just a few ideas and just a few of the movements. 2 overarching concepts I want you to remember as you're listening to this, or compositional elements that Ricky Ian Gordon uses are first text painting, and the second one are sort of recurring motives. So what text painting is where a composer will take an idea or a piece of text and try to imitate it musically. And at times this is very obvious. If you there's a part in the second movement where he refers to a bird, and you'll hear a little trill on the piano. The third movement, it's about a child dreaming about a piano, and you'll hear all these really simple scales going up and down for any of you who studied piano as little children, playing the scales over and over and over. But they're also at times a little bit more obscure. So I'll point some of those out as we go along. And the other one, like I said, are motives or gestures. These might be 2 or 3 notes that he will sort of hide and place in all of the movements to help sort of connect everything together. So if you have your first, if you go to the first page of the handout that I gave you, you'll see it says Figure 1. Winter Moon is the first movement, in which we already read. And at the beginning, the first 2 notes you see are in E sharp and an F sharp, and we often refer to this as a dissonant interval. It's clashing to the ear. But if you've ever been into the northern hemispheres and where it's really cold at night, that really cold sort of snap that sort of bites you, and that's what he's trying to get at with that. And then you'll hear underneath also these dissonant intervals, you hear some chords that are indicative of jazz harmonies. Thank you. The other thing I want to point out, if you... Oh, that was your cue. Sorry. She's so eager to be up here. Give me 2 more hours. The other thing I want to point out, too, is if you look in the first measure, the first notes you hear this E sharp and F sharp, and then right away you hear this F sharp below it. And it's this, what I call, for all intents and purposes, the short-long motive. And he uses this a lot throughout the entire piece. It's like da-da, either on different notes or the same note. And he uses it to sort of connect this whole piece together. If you look in figure 2, it's another good example of text painting. The words are slimmed, curved crook. And the whole movement, the vocal line, starts sort of low in the register, works its way up, and then the high point is when it gets to slim, curved crook, and then it works its way back down. You can sort of think if you're sitting outside at night watching the moon rise and get to a high peak, and then work its way back down. So listen for those things. Turn the page. If you go to figure 3, this example is from the second movement, The Genius Child, which really is kind of which the whole song cycle is based off of, and probably one of the most important movements in it. Let's just listen to the excerpt, and I'll explain. Good, thank you. So again, we have, if you look in the top line, in the piano part, again, we have this short-long motive again, tying everything together. And this whole movement has this sort of exuberantness to it, but it also has these really extreme type characters to it, because some of the words you're going to hear are wild and tame. So 2 extreme words. And so how he exemplifies this is especially through dynamics. At times you'll hear where it's really quiet, and then a measure later, it sort of explodes, and it's there's big forte sections. Or we're asked the performer to crescendo. Usually in music, composers will give performers time to crescendo. Well, here there's not really a whole lot of time to crescendo, so that you'll hear the performer start really soft, and within just a few seconds go to their extreme loud side of their dynamics. The other thing I want to point out, the little 16th note, it ends abruptly. And it's sort of like this, you can see this child getting ready to be excited for something and then be cut off. It's that sort of disenfranchisement of the genius child, that here this genius child is about to sort of bloom and be who they should be, and then suddenly they're cut off. If you look in figure 4, which is also from Genius Child, again, in the piano part, you have da-da-ba-ba, which is, again, our short-long motive. And then the vocalist sings, "Kill him." Well, that "kill him" is on a short-long motive. And then we hear a series of these quintuplets going down. So referring again to the ones that we heard to begin with. So all these ideas are sort of kind of cycling back within each movement, but in sort of a larger sense. If you turn the page and go to figure 5, Kid in the Park is actually the first movement that Ricky Eden Gordon finished. And unlike the other movements that he sees as sort of objective, and he's sort of watching these characters, this one is internal. And he sees it as himself, as a lonely gay child growing up in Long Island. And so he really connects with this one. So in regards to text painting, the most obvious example is if you look in the first measure, the piano plays a lone E all by itself and then just holds it there. So the sense of isolation. And then when the vocalist does enter and sing, there's no text to their words. And this is, Ricky Ian Gordon sees this as when a singer just vocalizes without words, it's a sense of loneliness, that there's no narrative structure to it. Eventually, there are words put to it, as you can see in figure 6, this lonely little question mark. But what's happening is they start on this E and then just slowly descend down. And throughout history, the music history, whenever you had a melody where it begins to descend, you start on a high pitch and you just work your way down, is a sort of sense of desperation, the sense of loneliness, the sense of sadness. Incidentally, speaking of our long-short motive, you can see it where it says mark, long-short, and also in the piano part, again, long-short, again, connecting all of these movements together. I'm going to jump ahead into figure 7, which also is movement 7, called prayer. And he takes that same idea of this descending sort of melodic lines in the prayer movement, again, sort of expressing this sense of sadness, this sort of sense of desperation, and also this repeated long-short motive right away in the piano, and then also when the vocalist sings, "I ask you this," and when you get to the word "this," it's another long-short motive. Turn the page to figure 8. Like a lot of song cycles, you hear the word cycle in it, and the word cyclic comes up, so ideas are coming back. And so this particular movement refers back to the winter moon, the first movement that we hear. And in the winter moon, there really is no one there. Except for the observer looking at the moon. But there's no other characters involved in this. In this particular movement, it also takes place at night, but this time it refers to people. And I didn't include the entire text, but it talks about people throughout this. And so he sees this as we've sort of worked our way from this sense of desolation, but we're back to night. But this time, night isn't necessarily a sad place of loneliness, but it's a place where people are with him, or as Langston Hughes writes, my people. The chords in the piano will sound very similar to the chords that you'll hear in the first movement, the winter moon. And also a couple motives come back in here. When the singer says, the night, again, short, long type motive. And then at the last measure that you see in the excerpt, where it says, so the faces. And that refers back to the prayer, where we had these kind of that repeative motive. But instead of just continually descending, it just stays on the same pitch. So it's sort of accepting of these, it's sort of come full circle, where it's not so much isolation and depression, but just acknowledgement. Now the last movement, it sort of sticks out a little bit like a sore thumb. It's not really cyclic, because he could have ended with my people, that movement 9, and been just fine. But he felt as though he needs to end this song cycle with something exuberant, to sort of end. He figured a lot of vocalists will put this on the end of the recital, so instead of sending people out with this really quiet piece, he wanted something that was sort of joyful and exuberant. So hence movement 10, joy. And if you remember back when I was talking about the movement called Genius Child, there were a lot of rhythmic displacement, where in that movement he's changing meters all the time. There's not a sense of steady pulse. Well, in that movement, it's supposed to create the sense of angst. In this movement, however, he uses the same technique, but he transforms it. So it's not angst anymore, but this excitement, this joyousness, this sort of sense of dancing. And that's what he's wanting to go for. I should also point out, when he gets the word butcher boy, again, short, long. So are those the only motives, the only examples of text painting that take place? No, there are tons. And so my challenge for you then is to sort of listen to any sort of motives that you think come back, any ideas or any other examples of text painting. So thank you.
It will all be full circle.
In the end, in the original, I have proof.
Okay, and it's customary when you sing a song cycle to hold your applause until the very end of the cycle. gone to class.